The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to select this bowl of shells. So we're going to be using the elliptical marquee tool. And as I draw this out, you can see I didn't get a real great selection, but instead of deselecting and trying to do it again, if you hold your space bar down, you can move that selection so that you can make adjustments to it. So I'm just holding my space bar down in order to move this, and try to get like the top left aligned first. Let go of your space bar and then you can move this out a little bit more. That's a pretty good selection. I don't think I'm going to have any white around the edge of that. And then I'm going to take my move tool and I'm going to move that over here in this space right here. And I'm going to deselect, Command D, or go up to Select, Deselect. The next thing that I'm going to be doing is selecting the Sally seashells. I'm going to zoom in on that so it's a little easier to see. Again, if I hold my space bar down, I can grab to navigate, or I can use my navigator panel, and that panel would be under Window if you can't find it. And when you're zoomed in, you can pull that little red box around to be able to navigate around your zoomed in object. So I'm going to use the elliptical marquee tool again, but instead of trying to click and drag from the edge, I'm going to click from the center. When I do that, I have to hold down the Option button. So I'm going to click and drag. Oops, not sure what happened there. Let me redo that. I'm going to click and drag while holding Option. And I didn't quite get it in the center, so while I'm holding Option, I'm also going to use my left hand to hold down the space bar. And that will let me make a couple of little adjustments to this to get a little bit better of a selection. And again, I'm trying to get those edges on there. I'm going to zoom back out so I can see my whole screen. And I'm going to move this over here. Then what I'm going to do is I want me to change the color of this. I want me to invert it. So before I deselect it, I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments, Invert. What that's going to do is it's going to swap the colors out. So the black is now white, the orange is now blue, because orange and blue are complements on the color wheel. Before I let go of this, I'm going to make a copy of it. So I'm going to hold Option down, and look what happens to my move tool. It turns into a little double arrow. So I'm going to click and drag that out and let those overlap each other a little bit. And then they want me to enlarge this or transform it a little bit before I deselect it. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Edit, Transform, Scale. And I'm going to scale this up. Now the nice thing about the new version of Photoshop is that it now has a proportion lock to it. So when I look up here in my width and my height, if this box is checked, it will keep like my circle in proportion, my width and my height in proportion. If I uncheck that box and try to scale this, you can see that I'm going to throw it out of proportion. I'm going to stretch it, and I don't want to do that. So I would always keep that box checked. It's a nice new feature to the newer software. So once I have that scaled up, you don't really have to do it with any particular amount. Just make it a little bit larger. What you're then going to do is hit the check mark or press the return key on your keyboard. we're going to deselect. So go select. No, I'm sorry, we are not going to deselect that because we need to make one more copy of it. So we're going to hold Option and we're going to drag that again. We're going to go back to Edit, Transform, and Scale. And we're going to make this one just a little bit bigger. So there should be 3 of them. The first one is very small. Then you have the middle one that's a little bit larger. And the last one, which is the biggest. We're going to apply that and then deselect it. The next thing that we're going to use is the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool is pretty cool because it selects things by color. We're going to zoom in to this so we can see that a little bit more. Now, we're not going to select the actual object. If I do, you can see it doesn't select the entire thing. It's only going to select pixels that are of a similar color. If those colors are too dark or too light, it's not going to grab them. So another way to do this is to first take your rectangular marquee tool, make a selection around it, and we're going to use that Magic Wand tool, but instead of selecting the object, we're going to select the background, but we're going to do subtract from. So up here, we're going to click on this button here, and that will subtract from the selection. So when I click on one of these white pixels in the background, it's going to select all the other white pixels that are within that rectangular marquee. And it's going to snap right to the edges of my coral. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to zoom back out so I can see where I need to put this. I'm going to take my Move tool. I'm going to move this right about here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to deselect that. The next thing I'm going to do is select this shell down here. So let's zoom in. And I'm going to zoom out just a smidge. And they're wanting me to use the lasso tool with this. There's a couple different lasso tools. The polygon lasso tool will select, I'll kind of show you what it does. You can click and select, but the problem is it does very straight edges. So when we get down here in these curves, it doesn't create curves. So that's not what we're going to want to use. We're going to want to use the lasso tool. This one's going to take a little bit of practice. There are much easier tools to use for this, but you need to practice this. So you need to have enough space on your desk to be able to do this in a very steady hand. Again, it takes some practice, and I'll show you what to do if I mess up. So if I were to go outside of this and mess that up, I'll show you how you can fix that. Or if I were to kind of come inside a little bit because my hand jerked a little bit. And if you don't get it the first time, just hit Escape on your keyboard and that will take that selection away and you can start over again. See, I've got a little couple spots down there that I need to fix. And take your time with it. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the top, and for the parts that I missed, I'm going to add to my selection. That's this one right here. So I'm going to add to my selection. So I'm just going to come back in here, get this little spot, and I'm just going to wrap this around, and that's going to jump to that. If I have some spots like this, I want to subtract from the selection. So I'm going to come in here, get along that edge a little bit better, and do that. I've got a couple little spots down here that I could clean up a little bit more. I want to get a really tight selection on that. Got a little spot here. And overall, I think that looks pretty good. I got a couple of little areas I could clean up, but it is just a tutorial. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to use my Move tool, and I'm going to move the shell that I just selected up here. Before I deselect this shell, they want me to transform it a little bit. They want me to rotate it a little bit. So I'm going to go back up to Edit, Transform, Rotate. It's going to put a bounding box around here. I can grab that corner and I can rotate that. Doesn't really matter how much you rotate it. And then I'm going to hit Return and deselect it. The last thing I need to select is this shell here. So again, I'm going to zoom in on this space. And they are going to have me use the magnetic lasso tool. Magnetic lasso tool works really well if you have an object that contrasts from the background a lot. So what happens is you're going to see it start to snap to the edge. So I'm just kind of going along the edge like I did with the lasso tool. And it's going to snap to the edge. It's a little more accurate. Don't go too fast or it won't be able to pick up the edges. Try to stay as close to the edge as you can. When you get down here, you might start to lose it a little bit in the shadow. And if you do, you can just go back in and add to that selection later or subtract the selection. I'm just going to come all the way around and make sure I end with where I started. I have to close that selection and then you'll see your marching ants. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to use my lasso tool to clean it up a little bit. And I want to take away from this selection right here. So I'm going to go right along this edge. Kind of get rid of that. I need to add to my selection right here. So I'll come back up here and add to my selection. So I have a nice clean edge around there. Looks pretty good. I'll zoom out, take my move tool, and that's going to go right about here, give or take. Try not to overlap the shells, but it's okay if it goes off the edge a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to deselect that. The last thing that I'm going to do to this is I'm going to crop the image because I have all of this space that doesn't look good and it's just more pixels that I don't need, which makes the file size larger. So I'm going to use the crop tool right here and you'll see that you have now these little crop marks. And I'm just going to drag, oops, don't do that. If you do that, just hit escape. I'm going to bring this in as close as I can. I'm going to bring the bottom in to crop the bottom of this. And you'll notice there's still a little bit of purple here. That's okay. We're going to get rid of that here in a second as well. So once you've got this centered within your crop area, apply it by hitting the check mark or the return box or return key. And then we've got this little area here that we need to get rid of. So I'm going to use the eraser tool for that. I'm going to take the eraser and I'm just going to, if I need to make that eraser bigger, I'm going to use the bracket, the right bracket on my keyboard. If I need to make it smaller, I'm using the left bracket on my keyboard. So I'm just going to erase that. Got a little bit of this that I can erase. And that's it. Then you're going to save it. You can just do File, Save. It's going to tell you that you can't save over the file because I actually locked it. So what you're going to do instead is File, Save As, and you can keep it right in that folder, that Working with Selections folder. In front of the 03, I need you to put your name. So Amber Kozar, and then just keep the 03 start.psd. I need to know whose this is because you're going to be emailing it to me. So don't just send me an untitled file. You're going to hit save. And then what you're going to do is go to your email. You're going to hit compose. You're going to start typing in my name, Amber Kozar. It should pop up. Please put a subject in here. So working with Selections is fine because that's the name in Google Classroom. You will hit the attach button and go to your desktop, find that folder, so Adobe Photoshop Classroom in a Book, working with selections, and then there's the one that I named. I'm going to click on that and hit open and let that load, and then you are going to hit send. That's all you need to do.